You boys look like a weird heavy metal band.
Yes, we are a band.
Really?
Yeah.
So what do you play?
Symphonic, post-apocalyptic, reindeer-grinding, Christ-abusing, extreme war, pagan, Fennoscandic metal.
Right. Really interesting.
What up, everybody? DJ Anubis here with you on the Metal Time Radio podcast. Doing a special segment episode here of the 10 most controversial boundary-pushing movies to ever exist. Now, it can be subjective because there's quite a few out there. Also, the things that separate these films from most is not only just how shocking they are, but the subject matter, what is shown, like in terms of, sometimes if you see a rape scene, like it will cut away, but sometimes some films will stay on it to give you that full traumatic experience of what it would be like, or to kind of give you a gauge of what it'd be like in that type of terror and whatnot. But, it's always controversial in terms of like, people, do they think it's too much? Some people really dig this stuff. To me personally, this is how I basically look at these type of films. If you're a fan of cinema, cinematography, directors pushing boundaries, I recommend watch them at least once to say, hey, I checked out what they did. I can make a decision for myself whether or not I feel that this is contributing to cinema in general or whatever artistic freedom. It's not that I would really recommend these to people as far as entertainment is concerned. Like they're kind of gut wrenching, a lot of them. Even some of the ones that I'm going to have runner-ups in a sense to mention, but they hit hard, both in what you're viewing and the subject matter. It can be squeamish, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, for a lot of you who follow cinema and horror movies and movies in general, get the idea what I'm driving at here. So first, I'm going to give you the first list. I have like kind of two broken up lists of the runner-ups. The first one is basically like this. Films that have reputations of being controversial, and especially if they're at time. So you have like Last Temptation of Christ, Last Tango in Paris, The Last House on the Left, Freaks, Blood Feast, Isla, the She-Wolf of the SS, Snuff, The Beast, and Baze Ma. These are films that, are part of that list of the controversial and boundary breaking. Then we get into probably about 6 films that I would say are above the ones I just put in that list in terms of like stuff that I've seen, and do I think they deserve an honorable mention, because they're not in my top 10. So the first one, of course, is Behind Covenant Walls. One thing about this film is, much like another film I'll be talking about, there's like a masturbation scene with a phallic that has like the picture of Christ on the end of it. So Behind Covenant Walls has some pretty it's called nunsploitation. It was during that period, so it's got a lot of this stuff going on with the religion and whatnot. So certainly pushes some boundaries. It's a shocker to me when I first saw it, and so I did buy it because to me it kind of stood out in some ways. It's not as graphic, even though this does show some things that you wouldn't expect it to, but it's not like some of the other films that are in this list. Obviously, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of tame by most standards nowadays, but at the time that it was released, it was very, very shocking. It was taking horror and cutting edge and really pushed the boundaries at that time. Personally, for me, TCM2 is my favorite because it actually pushed it even further and this is in the 80s, so when horror was at like an all-time high. Another film I did see in the theaters, it was controversial for different reasons, but more or less, I thought some of the beatings that Christ took at the end were a bit exaggerated. I didn't think any real man at the, because if you consider Christ, Jesus, being a man before his death, him taking that kind of beating and surviving just that was probably not going to happen. But certainly, this film created quite a stir at the time of its release, Passion of the Christ. I do remember going with my parents and watching that in the theaters. Caligula, it's one of the few films out there that I remember that ended up using like real pornographic actresses and actors in it to do some of the scenes, and it wasn't shying away. Obviously, it's one of those films that had to be edited for general markets, but certainly pushed to the boundary, and Malcolm McDowell part of that as well, and you'll see him later on as well. Then, of course, the Antichrist. Neko and I saw this some time back, and it, again, pushes some boundaries sexually and visually, and again, dealing with certain issues within the marriage and stuff, especially at the beginning. But interesting movie nonetheless. And of course, one that I saw on a whim that to me is kind of relevant today, like in terms of things that aren't discussed within, with our youth. And that's, of course, kids. Like, this film hits very hard with some serious subject matter. I believe Rosario Dawson's in this, and I do forget the other girl who kind of went up, become like a big star, mainly in movies like Big Love and stuff like that. Yeah, that's one of those films that takes on some serious subject matter and then applies it to modern day as well. This is, I think, an early 90s film, so certainly pushing boundaries back then. So now we're going to get into the top 10, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of the trivia behind it, if it has any information I think is relevant or interesting about the film. Also, I'll be showing the trailers for each one of these films that I go over in the top 10. So the first one, of course, is Clockwork Orange, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Cast consists of Malcolm McDowell, Patrick Magee, Anthony Sharp, and David Prowse, who most people know as Lord Vader. He's the actual body, and James Earl Jones, of course, is the voice, but Prowse is in this film. Plot is, in the future, a sadistic gang leader is imprisoned and volunteers for a conduct aversion experiment, but it doesn't go as planned. Some of the tidbits from this is this film was initially rated X, and of course, over time, it's now made the list of 100 greatest films ever made, so go figure. But in order to get the R rating initially, they had to cut like 30 seconds from the film to get there. And of course, another big note is in Britain, you couldn't actually see this film until 1999. So it took them that long to allow it to be shown in Britain. It was banned for that long. And it's probably still banned in some countries, probably. I don't know. Although most of the world now is kind of a little more lax on, films like this, because we see a lot more crazy shit these days. But let's check out the trailer for A Clockwork Orange.
There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. And we sat in the Korova milk bar trying to make up our razoo-docs what to do with the evening. The Korova milk bar sold Milk Plus, which is what we were drinking. This would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of the old ultra-violence.
Hi there, my little droogies. The evening's the great time, isn't it, Alex Boy?
He's enterprising, aggressive, young, bold, vicious. He'll do.
Who on earth could that be?
Now it was lovely music that came to my aid, a bit of the old Ludwig van.
Pretty well, little brother. Pretty well.
It'll be your own torture. I hope to God it'll torture you to madness.
Stop it, please, I beg you! Food, all right.
Great, sir, great.
Try the wine.
Oh, it was gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh.
So yeah, there you go. Clockwork Orange, you can tell, great cinematography there, now in 4K. You know, everything from the uniforms of the Droogs to some of the, you know, terminology and slang that they were using throughout the film. I can't remember the name of the guy that actually was responsible for the slang used, but it might have been the writer. I'm not sure. There was a book that was based upon before Kubrick took it over, but yeah, it's got a lot of great stuff in there. Even Rob Zombie, who does a lot of, you know, some horror films now, he was inspired by films such as this, you know, for one of his songs, Red Red Groovy, which he kind of played, you know, a parody of that film and that song. So certainly a very cool movie. Again, you know, you can argue how much it pushes boundaries compared to some of the other ones listed or ones that I have coming up, but I think it does set the standard of time of being one of the first to really kind of like do that. And Kubrick was always pushing boundaries throughout his films, even towards the end of his days, you know, as a director. I'd have to go back and kind of watch Eyes Wide Shut, but you know, that's considered one of his weakest attempts. But if I recall, he was still doing, you know, wild shit in that as well. All right, let's move on to number 9 here, which is 2008's Martyrs. And this is directed by Pascal Laugier. Cast consists of Morana Aloy, Mylene Jampani, and Catherine Begin. And the plot is a young woman's quest for revenge against the people who kidnapped and tormented her as a child leads her and a friend who is also a victim of child abuse on a terrifying journey into a living hell of depravity. Couple of notes with this film. Mylene and Morana came out in an interview a little bit after the film, like maybe a year or two later, apparently stating they would not work with director Paul Laugier again. Now, I'm not really sure, like I never got to the basis of exactly why, whether or not it was just because it was an uncomfortable experience on the set. Like one thing that happened was Alau, I think she plays Anna, she broke her 3 bones during the movie and had to stay in bed for 6 weeks. So I don't know how that happened or why. Maybe it's just an unsafe environment. I know one thing the actresses were saying that he wasn't very vocal in terms of direction. So like, even though he talked to him and had lunch with him prior to the film, it was basically like they were thrown in with the script and then just they were supposed to do their thing. Like he didn't give much input, I guess, from the way they were describing. Like they, like Alau was talking about how she kind of felt lost in the movie because she didn't know if she was doing things right or you know what she was supposed to be doing in terms, like, because you know you're on set sometimes and we watch it as viewers and it looks like everything's shot exactly the way we see it, but they do it oftentimes in parts. So she may have been looking for more direction as a young actress and didn't really find that he was very communicative in that regard. But let's check out the trailer for 2008's Martyrs.
T'as pu les voir? Ils ont changé, mais c'est eux.
There you go. I will say that film is quite disturbing in a lot of ways, and it's, the thing about some of these films that we're talking about is they don't always end on like happy notes. A lot of them can end up just being downright sad and depressing by the end of it, and that's one of these films. So should you trudge in that area, be forewarned. Now there was a remake, an American remake, which I didn't watch, but because they say to watch this one's the best one. But the American remake, they say, isn't bad. So it just depends on what you want to do. I know this one here was on Tubi, so if you want, I think the remake is also, like, they're usually out there being, able to be viewed and whatnot. So Martyrs from 2008. And number 8, we have 1988's Necromantic, and directed by Jorg Buttgereit, and I know I butchered his name, I apologize. Cast consists of Bernd Docteri, Lorenz, Beatrice Manaski, and Harold Lunt. Plot is a street sweeper who cleans up after grisly accidents brings home a full corpse for him and his wife to enjoy sexually, but is dismayed to see that his wife prefers the corpse over him. So, there's not much like in the way of trivia for this film or anything that I could find right off the bat as far as like tidbits. I will say that some things I did learn. Obviously, I saw the second one, Necromantic 2, which is just as disturbing. So some people say that's better than the first one, but I think because this one was the one that kind of broke the ground in that regard, I chose that one on this list. But the other thing is, in some countries, they've edited it so much that they also edited the second film, so they kind of brought them together to try to give them a full movie, but without giving you a lot of the extreme details and the part of the films that are usually cut out. But you'll see in like the trailer here, I'm going to give you guys warning. A lot of crazy stuff in this trailer. I don't even know if this is going to be clipped by YouTube, so I'll make notes and edits to my description box if any of these are clipped out. You guys can find them online. It's not a problem because that's where I got them. But should they clip it from my video, then just be forewarned. But here is the trailer for 1988 Necromantic. There you got it. Now, like I said, aside from a few of these films, most I would not really recommend for entertainment purposes because it's not. I don't really see the entertainment value in them so much as if you're just interested in filmmaking and you're interested in cinematography, how it's shot, the boundaries that are pushed while doing them. That's the only thing I can really recommend. That's why usually when I rate movies like this, I don't even give them a rating because what are you going to say? Like it's a 10 out of 10. Like I can't say it's a 1 out of 10. I can't say it's a 10 out of 10 because it's just different than what you're expecting. And it's more of just the shock and awe of how far directors will go to do their art. And so again, that's judging by that trailer, you'd be like, what's so entertaining about it? Well, there's really nothing entertaining too much about it as it is it's just part of cinema and like stuff that's been created and pushing boundaries that people talk about. So that's why. All right. Moving on to number 7. Was actually referred by a friend years ago to watch this. He was talking about it so much, and he was definitely somebody who was into a lot of crazy movies. He's one that got me to watch Audition, which funny enough is one of the films that sort of people mention with terms of controversy, but I think that's kind of tame compared to most standards now, especially compared to this film. But he was always recommending metal bands that I would end up checking out and liking. Ruins of Better Brass. He was somebody who helped me discover them. But movie wise, he would always mention stuff, and of course, one that he mentioned here was 2001's Ichi the Killer. Directed by Takashi Miike, cast as Tadanobu Asano, Nao Omori, Shinya Tsukamoto. And the plot is a sadomasochistic Yakuza enforcer, Katahari, searches for his missing boss. He comes across Ichi, a repressed and psychotic killer who may be able to inflict levels of pain that Katahari has only dreamed of achieving. And I can tell you that's kind of it's like tame in terms of how it describes this movie. This movie is ridiculous. One of the first times, even though it's not really showing, I recall, doesn't really show any real sexual parts in terms of the main guy, the repressed psychotic killer, Ichi. But there are scenes where he's kind of finishing himself, and like you can see the stuff dripping because he gets turned on, just like how he gets sexually excited with the violence. So this movie kind of ties in with the like sex and violence thing a lot in this film. Of course, the enforcer is the guy you see in the cover with like the safety pins in his face from being cut or whatever. But this guy enjoys pain in the most he can push. So he gets, while he's investigating these killings, he's intrigued by Ichi and what he's doing. So here we go with Ichi the Killer from 2001. There you go. So yeah, there's like a lot of extreme violence in this film. Just fair warning, but certainly again, highly recommend at least one viewing to kind of gauge and check out what they're doing and how crazy they were getting, especially all of the older films, like they're pushing boundaries all the time. And some of them, as we said, with like A Clockwork, ended up becoming like favorite films of all time when they started out being banned and like a lot of negative press and whatever. So, but I think it kind of tells you no matter what critics might say about something, like the viewers and the fandom and the audiences are the ones that speak the loudest. Like a lot of these films are able to continue on because audiences don't want to have things censored. Like even if they think it's grotesque or whatever, they don't want to be censored for things. And so all right. What are we at? Number 6. And that is 1980s. One that a lot of people are familiar with, Cannibal Holocaust. Directed by Ruggero Deodato. Cast consists of Robert Kerman, Francesca Ciardardi, Perry Perkinen. And plot is, during a rescue mission into the Amazon rainforest, a professor stumbles across lost film shot by missing documentary crew. And obviously, one of the more notorious things about this film was the killing of live animals like turtles and monkeys and spiders. Something that a lot of people frown upon, don't like, which I agree. I'm not into animal torture at all. Although I can understand like why at the time they were trying to make it as realistic as possible. Nowadays, there's ways to go about making stuff look real without going to that length. So thankfully, we've progressed beyond that type of thing. But also Eli Roth did Green Inferno, which was like a soft, almost reboot of this film, for those that don't know. Apparently, 10 days after the film was released, it was seized by the Italian courts, and Deodato was arrested for obscenity charges. He was also the subject of murder because he had told the actors to lay low after the film and not be seen. This is similar to what happened with Blair Witch in terms of the PR. So Deodato was like, I don't want you guys to show yourselves. I want people to think that you're really dead, like, being killed on film and stuff. And it caused a big stir back then because they could not find or track down the actors. And then it was like for a year, I think. And finally, when the actors did come out, when they saw how serious shit was getting, they stepped forward and said, hey, we're alive. We're good. Another big aspect of this film was it's one of these weird things. Like it's a real rape on screen, but at the time, like it was still considered supposed to happen anyway. Like from what I recall, the actress and actor were supposed to do which was a rape scene as far as like the acting part of it. And the actress wanted to go through a practice run. So they were going to have real sex and practice having the rape scene itself just to try to get the gauge of it. But the actor didn't want to do it. And so when he finally did, he I guess his thought process was to make it as real and as believable as possible. I'd have to go back. I don't have any of the quotes from the girl now, but I think that she was very unhappy about that. Mainly because you're not really expecting what's going to happen. Like, that you're doing a scene, but when you haven't really worked out or talked it out what's supposed to happen, there's that communication factor. It's jarring. So like there was a lot of controversy about this film back then, but certainly still stands the test of time in terms of reputation and everything that happened. And of course we saw the cover art, this scene here with the chick on this wooden pike. They actually believed at the time that was real. It did look quite convincing. I mean, everything that Deodato did in this film looked legit, in terms of the believability of everything. So let's check out the trailer for Cannibal Holocaust.
Four young and fearless Americans, children of the space age, armed with cameras, microphones, and curiosity. Alan Yates, Faye Daniels, and their two cameramen and inseparable friends, Jack Anders and Martin Tomaso. Four youngsters who never came back. Are they still alive? And if so, where are they? These are the questions that the rescue team sponsored by New York University and the Pan American Broadcasting System hope to be able to answer.
Good Lord. It's unbelievable. It's horrible. I can't understand the reason for such cruelty. It must have something to do with some...
Difficult doesn't exist. The impossible takes just a little more time.
We'll be back. We have Felipe, our guide. Say hi.
All right. So there you have it. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. All right. Breaking into our top 5. And we have 1971's, and I've talked about this before, I think even with Samurai a little bit, is The Devils. Directed by Ken Russell. Cast consists of Vanessa Redgrave and Oliver Reed. Plot is, in the 17th century France, Father Urbain Grandier's protection of the city of Loudun from the corrupt Cardinal Richelieu is undermined by a sexually repressed nun's accusation of witchcraft. Obviously, this movie, much like a lot of the nunsploitation films of the period, created a lot of stir. And, whenever you're targeting religion as your axe to grind, so to speak, when you're using that as your premise of being controversial, it's going to strike a huge chord. There's one sequence in here where the nuns tear down and ravish a life-size icon of Christ in a orgiastic frenzy, which ended up having to be cut. And eventually that footage was vanished. But furthermore, like Warner Brothers, for whatever reason, has not wanted to put out a director's cut of this film. But I know fans and viewers for a long time have wanted that uncut one to come out there. I went to a site not too long ago before I started doing this, and somebody was selling like a supposedly uncut director's version of it. I get very wary of that because I actually have a version of The Devils. Now, I've seen the uncut, which was on Shudder at one point, a couple of years ago, and that's how I knew about it. So then I bought it, but the one I have is kind of the edited version. The edited version is still very much good, but it's not the director's cut, obviously. But the thing is too is apparently at one point after the release, Russell was doing an interview with someone named Alexander Walker, and they can't seem to find the interview now because it was videotaped. But apparently, it got so heated that Russell was so angry with Walker that he rolled up a newspaper or something and whacked the guy in the head before leaving or whatever. And like you know, it wasn't like massively violent, but apparently at that time that particular interview went badly. But apparently you can't really find the interview anywhere unless they've added on to a director's cut of the film or something, which would be kind of funny. But there's also some rumors or talk that at the time that they were filming this with some of the nuns that were kind of naked and whatnot. Some of them were sexually assaulted by the crew members on the film set. And one of the things that the women were pushing, the actresses were pushing for, was to have more protection and representation on the set, which is something we see more now of in today's age. Look how long it took to kind of get that to where you have, for certain films, you have sex counselors or something for whenever they do sex scenes with people, even if it's not full-fledged sex scenes. Like, you've got counseling on how to deal with that and navigate that space for women and men. And you know, back then you just didn't have that. It was like you were at the mercy of whatever was going on that set with the director and whatnot. So also apparently our very own Cassandra Peterson, who did Elvira some years later, was cast as a nun in the film. However, because they wanted her to shave her head, she declined to do the movie. But how funny would that have been? Like, she was a still gorgeous chick. But Elvira became such a big thing for me growing up, and that was just kind of a cool tidbit that I've discovered through that there. But here's a trailer for The Devils to give you an idea of what it's all about.
Do you remember the first time your thoughts were turned to evil things?
He plies me with caresses, lustful, obscene. He enters my bed at night and takes from me that which is consecrated to my divine bridegroom, Jesus Christ.
And what form does this incubus take? Who is responsible for this evil possession?
But of course I can prove nothing. This Mother Superior may be little more than a hysterical nun.
But if it is a genuine case of possession by devils, and if Grandier himself was proved to be involved, then yes, I think it bears investigation, gentlemen.
You've been a magician.
I'd commerce with devils.
You face eternal damnation.
Conjecture is useless. We need a professional witch hunter. We must send for Father Barre.
Surprises for you.
His Majesty's triumphed again.
Beside the radiance of His Majesty.
I have been a man. I have loved women. I have enjoyed power.
There you have it. Yeah, so that film, I really love that film a lot, just from a lot of different cinematographic aspects of how it's shot, the scenes, like the craziness of it all. Really, without like, it doesn't have like a shit ton of gore or anything like that, but it's just very blasphemous, I guess you would call it. But it does surpass in some ways over A Clockwork Orange for me. When I saw it younger with Clockwork Orange, I thought that was like one of the craziest movies I'd ever seen. Lo and behold, years later, I'd see so much more that's gone beyond that, you know. But yeah, there you go. That was The Devils. Next up, number 4. Death Wish 2, 1982, directed by Michael Winner. Cast is Charles Bronson, Jill Ireland, and Lawrence Fishburne. Plot is in 17th century France. I'm looking at the wrong one. Sorry about that. I don't know why I did that. Oh, man, I screwed up my plot there. But basically, Bronson plays Kersey, a guy, especially from the first film, Death Wish, which is highly regarded as the best of the series, but I always go back to this one. And basically, Bronson's character is a vigilante who's killing, in this particular film, his wife, or his daughter and his maid are raped and murdered. And so he goes on a killing spree. And Lawrence Fishburne, this is one of his earliest roles, is actually one of the thugs in the film, which is why I mentioned him, before he became like the biggest thing. He's like one of my favorite actors of all time. But, Bronson being Bronson at this time, I remember the R-rated version in the U.S. is heavily edited because of the rapes. Like, they're so fucking graphic. And I mean, I was probably about 12 or 13 when I saw this film. So, it had been right around when it was released. And even the daughter, like, because she's been kidnapped and raped repeatedly, she jumps out a window, second story window or something, and like impales herself on a gate. I'm sure a lot of those scenes are now taken out of the film, but at the time, man, like that was some of the more brutal and gut-wrenching stuff to watch. Like it was really tough to watch. Just how graphic they were. And it wasn't like you were seeing like the intercourse itself, but just the brutality of it all. And I think Jill Ireland was his wife around the time, so she was in a lot of his films. And so let's give it a whirl. Here's the trailer for Death Wish 2.
It happened once before.
Some muggers followed my wife and daughter home from the market.
It's about to happen again.
The police there got a very good description of the muggers, too. But it didn't do any good.
We do what we can.
And so does he.
Is this your daughter, Mr. Kersey? Mr. Kersey, is that Carol?
When murder and rape are the crimes, Bronson is the only punishment. Charles Bronson, Death Wish 2.
There's something else you should know, sir. Paul Kersey now lives in Los Angeles.
Oh, my God.
Now you tell me there's a vigilante out there. You believe in Jesus? Yes, I do. Well, you're going to meet him.
He killed 9 people in New York City 4 years ago. The people he killed were muggers. He became a hero.
What did he look like?
He was a very good citizen, that's what he was. That guy saved our lives, damn it. Where the hell were you guys, giving out parking tickets?
When violence rules the city, when the police can't stop it, one man will, his way.
Watch out!
Charles Bronson.
Goodbye.
Death Wish 2. He's doing it for you.
He's doing it for you. I like that. Yeah. So again, I probably would. I don't actually own this. I probably would, but I have to get the director's cut. That's really the only way to really get it, in terms of like the anger that the character of Kersey feels, because that's why you don't feel bad for these guys when they're getting taken out of the game. It's kind of how it works with the Death Wish films. I know that Bruce Willis did a remake of the first one. Aside from the ending of that film, it wasn't as good or near the level that Bronson gave in the films that he did. So just for a warning with that. Number 3. This has always been a classic. People know about, just like Cannibal Holocaust is 1978's I Spit on Your Grave. Directed by Mir Zarchi, cast as Camille Keaton, Aaron Tabor, and Richard Pace. Plot is an aspiring writer is repeatedly assaulted, humiliated, and left for dead by 4 men she systematically hunts down to seek revenge. This has been remade, ironically, by the directors and the producers that worked on the first film, doing a more updated version of stuff. I've seen some clips from the remake. It's not horrible, but I always have a hard time with remakes unless they're like just so badass that you can appreciate them more. Like probably one of the more modern female revenge films I like is actually called Revenge. It's on Shudder now, actually. It's a very good film. Deals with similar content, only more of like these guys are purposely hunting this chick down and trying to harm her and stuff. But it turns out very graphic, gory, but as we know here, it's been done before. One thing that I found interesting, I just saw a doc on this movie being made about the director and everybody, and believe it or not, that ass is a young Demi Moore. That's her ass. Take it in. Soak it in, guys. That's her ass. So even before she did Parasite and became a big star herself, that's her. For a long time, people were debating whether or not it really was her. Like, it was kind of like that rumor, but apparently that's been verified, especially through this doc. And apparently Moore herself has admitted that it is her on the cover. The thing about this film too is the director got inspiration by a real life event that happened to him and his daughter and a friend of his, that they were going to go play tennis. And as they got there, a girl came up out of the woods, beaten and raped, who they then took to the hospital. And he was kind of upset because the authorities at the time, which is one of the biggest complaints that women have about law enforcement when it comes to domestic violence and rape, they're like, well, what were you wearing? That was like one of the first things that this director says the cops asked. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's got nothing to do with anything. Like, this chick needs help, needs a hospital. And so it led him to write this movie. And this they did do a lot of time. Like Aaron Tabor, I believe, who plays one of the villains in this, the guys that are raping the main character. He actually admitted he didn't do films after that. Like that film and that character kind of ruined him. Like, obviously the girl actress said these guys were all gentlemen. They all treated her with respect. In fact, one of the things they did, all 4 guys stripped down naked in the film to sort of show a solidarity with her, because she had to be naked a lot in the film. So they did it to make her more feel comfortable. Like she's not the only one with the gays and everything in the film. But Tabor was like, yeah, I could never, it was just a weird thing for him. He could never get over that particular role. Like, it just was very dramatic for him because it's not him as a person. So having to kind of go to those depths to do something that evil on film, even if it's fake, it kind of leaves a mark for some actors. That happens a lot. But the woman, she still talks about the film, and she's very still much about it. Like, she says, sure, it was controversial and disturbing, but she said that it's very important because she said there was a lot of women at the time that would come up to her at premieres and stuff and say they thanked her because they're like, what was on screen shows just how dramatic and traumatizing it is to go through that. And I think that's a lot of things that some people kind of miss when they start talking negatively about some of these films, is that they're like, well, you don't need to show that. You could just kind of imply it. And like, yeah, you can, but what makes you more uncomfortable? Something that's implied or something that you actually have to sit and witness yourself? Like, what is it, right? And even though it's acting, like, the way that you convey it is more, it sticks with you. It does. Like, you can't, it's like if you were to see a dead body, it would stick with you the rest of your life. Now, obviously, when it comes to film, we know that they're acting. We know that there's, practical effects and everything else. But sometimes when it's told in this type of way, it's designed to stick with you afterwards. So you're having to think about it, think about what you just processed and viewed. And so here we go with I Spit on Your Grave. And apparently also one thing was mentioned in the doc was that boat scene. Like, apparently she came really close to actually hitting the guy with the fucking motor. So kind of risky there with some of that stunt work. All right, we're down to the last two here. First, at number 2 now. Both these last two films are ones that were shown by a friend of mine about 4 or 5 years ago. Actually, it might be a little bit longer now, around 2014 or 15. And he warned me they were explicit and crazy. And so, I was a glutton for punishment. So I was like, throw it at me, dude. I've seen some crazy shit. He's like, no, you haven't. So, yeah. At number 2, 1975's Salò, or The 120 Days of Sodom. Directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini. Cast consists of Paolo Bonacelli, Giorgio Cadati, Uberto Palio Quintaville. Plot is, in World War II Italy, 4 fascist libertines round up 9 adolescent boys and girls and subject them to 120 days of physical, mental, and sexual torture. Cannot begin to tell you the craziness in this film. Now, from a gore standpoint, there's some in it, but not like a massive amount. Most of the depravity and craziness is, of course, but yeah, a lot of stuff like you have stuff like, of course, incestuous stuff going on in this, at least, implied, obviously. Eating feces, just a lot of crazy nonsense in this. But one thing that struck me about the film was just how well shot it is. Like, it's clean. It's not, for the time period, it's not gritty. It's not fuzzy. A lot of the grindhouse stuff that we like and grew up with have those vibes, kind of like I Spit on Your Grave has those kind of vibes. But this film is shot very clean. Well acted. You really hate these dudes, like beyond hate. So you hate the characters, obviously. Some of the things, the film was rejected by the cinema in 1976 for a private showing of uncut version. Heavily edited version, minus 6 minutes of footage, which I'm sure takes out a lot of that stuff, including scenes of torture, homosexuality, and excrement eating. I believe it. And including a 4-minute prologue describing the history of the town of Salò. Was later prepared by UK censor James Furman for club showings. The film was finally passed completely uncut for cinema and video in the UK in December 2000. So it was really, when we talk about like A Clockwork Orange and all these films, they didn't get past Britain until near the, right around 2000. So whatever law at that time had really been keeping a lot of these films out of there. Yeah, this film is nuts. It does get crazier towards the end, and it even ends like it's one of these films that does not end on a happy note. It's nuts. So prepare yourself. It really dives deep into some really sick shit. People, again, they're like, why you want to watch this? For me, it's more about curiosity of how far a director will go for its artistic expression, the cinematography behind it, why it makes it so controversial, because there is a curiosity about that. I'm not telling you you're going to enjoy this from like a entertainment value, but if you're interested in filmmaking and stuff like that, and this, you want to see like the types of things that directors will go to do to prove whatever, whether they're bucking a system about something. Like my number 1 film was more about pushing back against censorship than it was about anything else. But yeah, here is the trailer for Salò, or The 120 Days of Sodom. There you have it. All right. And as far as I know, I don't know if this is even on streaming anywhere. And if it is, it's probably edited in some way. I think the only way to really see the uncut version is to actually purchase it, unless it shows up on like Shudder or something. I don't think they'll ever show edited version unless they're forced to. That leads us to number one. And certainly the most graphic, ridiculous, and far more depraved than this Salo is a Serbian film, 2010. Directed by Srđan Spasojevic. Cast consists of Srđan Todorovic, Serge Trifunovic, Jelena Garilovic. Plot is an aging porn star agrees to participate in an art film in order to make a clean break from the business, only to discover that he has been drafted into making a pedophilia and necrophilia themed snuff film. Tidbit on this is this is the second of only 2 films to date to receive an R20 plus rating in Japan. The other being Grotesque, 2009. I have not seen that yet. People have recommended it, but I have not seen it, so I'm assuming it's up there as far as like some of the crazy shit that I've been talking about in this episode. The US version is cut by approximately 1 minute to get an NC-17 rating. I know which one that is because I think the one that I watched, because my friend had it on DVD or Blu-ray, was the cut version. Like, I think the uncut version deals with the infant. And I'm not going to get into any details with that. But let me tell you this. I would tell you, like, I'm trying to see how I can get around this, because just to show you how far it goes, right? Now, one, this porn star, the actor who's portraying him, is a lot of times being drugged. And then he's put in these situations with these women and other people where he's having sex, and then he ends up, like, one case he's doing a girl from behind, and, you know, it's being filmed, and next thing you know, he's grabbing a machete, and he's like, it's almost like cutting the head off of a chicken. You know, you kind of get my drift here with where I'm going with that. You don't actually see the beheading, I don't think. I could be wrong. It's been a while. Unless that's one of the edited parts. I don't know. But the other scene that's the most disturbing for me is, you know, again, he's sort of drugged up, and he's basically put in a position to bang somebody who's being covered up. So it's from behind, but the person has like a blanket over them. There's a person next to him with a blanket over, and then some dude in a mask, right? So they're both banging these people. What ends up happening, and this film's been out a while, so if you don't want the spoiler here with this part of it, because it's not really the end, the end is really bleak, but if you don't want the spoiler, you can kind of just skip over the next couple of minutes. But what ends up happening is, once the blankets are removed, or sheets, or whatever they've got covered, it turns out he's butt fucking his son. Like, they set him up to butt fuck his son, who's only like 9 or 10 years old. The guy next to him is butt fucking his wife. And it turns out the guy in the mask is his brother, who has like this secret crush on his wife. So it's a very dramatic scene just in general, but it doesn't, it's part of the biggest part of it, but there's so much craziness in the film already. You're just saying to yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I watching this film? Again, this is not an entertaining film, dude. It's not there for that. Now, I don't know. There's some people may get entertainment out of it. I do not. It was certainly interesting, and I was curious about it, sure. It's well shot. It's a great shot film. I understand why the director wants to push boundaries, do these kind of things, because it's all about shock and awe. and he was pushing back against Germany, I think, in terms of their censorship and, be kind of rebelling against the industry there with this film. But again, unless you're interested in it from a filmmaker point of view, or acting, or just a general interest in films, don't go into it thinking you're going to see a happy-go-lucky. It's not even your average horror film. It's so dreadful. There's so much dread in it. And sometimes, when it comes to regular horror films, I look at Nightmare on Elm Street, there's dread. It's not a happy film. It's not like later on where you got some of the more comedic reprisals throughout the films that kind of alleviate the tension. Nightmare on Elm Street just stays dreadful, and that's what makes it great. But it doesn't have this kind of content. This kind of content strikes home real hard and real. And it's pretty bad in terms of just content, but it did its job. It's pushing boundaries. It's being controversial on many levels. And if you ever get a chance to see it, if you ever watch it, you'll understand why. So here is the trailer for a Serbian film.
Slušaj me pažljivo. Sprema se nešto veliko.
Želim znao o čemu se radi u filmu.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
All right. Serbian film. And yeah, like I said, man, these films are some of the ones out there that really push the boundaries of filmmaking and are still talked about today. A lot of them. Even now when you go into forums and stuff and we're talking about films and stuff like that, it's a very hot topic with films like a Serbian film. People are very much against it, and some are encourage it. Now, personally, again, I can't give you a rating of whether it's good or bad. It's interesting, and it does push boundaries. It does its job. I can't recommend it in the sense for the general audience because it just pushes so much shit in there that it's not really made for people that are just looking for a good time. Even if you're a basic horror fan, you're not going to enjoy this film from that point of view. Anybody that really gets an enjoyment out of this, I have to question them a little bit in terms of what they find entertaining, because this stuff is so disturbing on so many levels. So unless you're just appreciating it for, what's being shot and how it's shot and all that stuff, then that I get. But getting enjoyment from this in any way, I don't know, man. I have to question you a little bit there. Yeah, but that's it, man. That's my top 10 and some of the runner-ups that I showed you there. Hit me up in the comment section. What do you think? Is there films that I missed at all in here that you might think deserve to be on this controversial pushing the boundary list? Would you consider these not pushing it enough? I don't know. Let me know, man. Tell me what you think. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, please. Any kind of support is muchly appreciated. And tomorrow, I'll be with Mr. Poet. We're doing a live stream of the NFL draft for the first round, and we'll be doing that. It'll start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And then Friday, about 8 o'clock p.m., I'm going to have some guys, special guests, doing a review of Late Night with the Devil, the new horror film on Shudder right now. We're going to talk a little bit about that and whether or not it was good or bad. And you can join us in a live chat to talk about that if you want to there with that. Also, if you're into sports, join us tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do a pre-show kicking off before the draft kicks off at 8. And we're glad to have you guys talking in there. Just your favorite teams, who you want to draft, whatever. Let me know. All right. Take care, all. This is the Metal Tavern Radio Podcast. I am your host, DJ Anubis, and I will see you next time.